"Uncle, where's my papa?" The coffee cup slipped slightly in my grip as I looked up from the park bench where I'd been drowning in my own misery. Jobless for 3 months, rent overdue tomorrow, and my savings account showing a number that made me want to cry. But none of that mattered when I saw the little boy standing in front of me, tears streaming down his flushed cheeks, his blue eyes wide with fear. I set my cup down immediately and crouched to his level, my knees protesting against the movement. "Hey there, buddy. What's wrong? Where did you last see your dad?" My voice came out softer than I expected, probably because seeing a scared child hit different when you're already feeling vulnerable yourself. He hiccuped, trying to form words between sobs, but nothing coherent came out. People walked past us, joggers with their headphones in, couples holding hands, elderly folks feeding pigeons, but nobody stopped. Nobody even glanced our way. That realization made something twist uncomfortably in my chest. I gently placed my hand on his small shoulder, feeling him tremble beneath my palm. "It's going to be okay. I promise we'll find your papa. Can you tell me your name first?" "I'm Javier." "Elijah," he managed to say, wiping his nose with the back of his hand. His lower lip still quivered, and I could see he was fighting hard not to break down completely again. "That's a strong name for a strong boy," I said, trying to inject some lightness into my tone. "Tell you what, Elijah, how about we get you some ice cream while we figure this out? Would you like that?" I pulled out my phone, checking if I had enough in my account for even a simple cone. Barely. But this kid needed comfort more than I needed those few dollars. His eyes lit up just a fraction, and he nodded. I took his hand, so small and trusting, and walked him to the ice cream cart near the park entrance. As he licked his chocolate cone, some color returned to his face and he started talking. His papa's name was George. He said George, something that sounded important but I couldn't quite catch, because Elijah's mouth was full of ice cream. I approached the park security office, explained the situation, and they made an announcement over the PA system. Then I called the non-emergency police line, just to be safe. The officer on the other end asked me to stay put with the child, and I agreed without hesitation. Elijah clung to my hand like a lifeline. And honestly, I didn't mind. There was something about this kid that made me want to protect him from everything wrong in the world. Nearly an hour passed. Elijah told me about his school, his favorite cartoons, how his papa worked a lot but always made time for bedtime stories. I listened, nodding along, occasionally asking questions to keep him distracted from the underlying anxiety I could still see in his small frame. Then I heard it, tires screeching against pavement. A black SUV pulled up to the park entrance so fast I thought it might jump the curb. The door flew open before the vehicle completely stopped, and a man emerged like he was stepping out of a magazine spread. Tall, easily over 6 feet, with a jawline so sharp it could probably cut glass. His gray suit fit him perfectly, expensive fabric that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. But what caught me off guard were his eyes, dark brown, intense, scanning the area with an almost predatory focus until they landed on us. "Elijah." His voice cracked with emotion as he sprinted toward us, all that corporate composure shattering in an instant. He dropped to his knees right there on the grass, not caring about the dirt on his expensive pants, and pulled his son into his arms. "Oh God. Buddy. You're okay. You're okay." Elijah buried his face in his father's shoulder, finally letting go of all the fear he'd been holding back. "Papa, I got scared. I couldn't find you." I know. I'm so sorry, baby. Papa's here now." The man's voice shook and I saw his hands trembling as he ran them through Elijah's hair, checking him over for any signs of injury. It was raw, this display of paternal love, and I felt like an intruder witnessing something so intimate. I took a small step back, trying to give them space, but the man's eyes suddenly locked onto mine. He stood slowly, Elijah still in his arms, and moved toward me. Up close he was even more intimidating, not in a threatening way, but in that way people with power and presence naturally are. "You," he paused, his voice thick, "you helped my son?" I shoved my hands into my jean pockets, suddenly very aware of how underdressed and out of place I looked compared to him. "Yeah. I mean, he was upset. Anyone would have done the same. But they didn't." His gaze held mine, something unreadable flickering in those dark eyes. "Everyone else walked by. You stopped. You stayed with him. He shifted Elijah slightly on his hip. Thank you doesn't seem adequate, but thank you, truly. It's really okay. I'm just glad he's safe. I meant it. The relief flooding through me was genuine. Your name? He asked, his tone softer now, almost careful. Xavier Carter. I extended my hand awkwardly and he shook it with his free hand, his grip firm and warm. George Westford. The name clicked in my brain immediately. Westford Enterprises, the real estate giant that owned half the commercial buildings downtown. I'd seen his face in business articles, always looking stern and untouchable. But right now, he was just a grateful father holding his child. I'd like to properly thank you, Javier. Perhaps I could take you to dinner. Or he paused, studying my face with an intensity that made my skin prickle. Actually, may I have your contact information? I'd like to discuss something with you. I rattled off my number, which he typed into his phone with practiced efficiency. Elijah waved at me from his father's arms, a tired but genuine smile on his face. Bye, Javier. Thank you for the ice cream. Anytime, buddy. You take care, okay? I waved back, watching as George carried him to the SUV. Before getting in, George looked at me one more time over his shoulder, and something in that look made my stomach flip in a way I couldn't quite identify. The SUV drove off, and I was alone again with my cold coffee and uncertain future. The afternoon sun was setting, casting orange shadows across the park, and I made my way back to my tiny apartment. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about those intense brown eyes and the way George had looked at me, like he was seeing something I didn't even know was there. The next morning, the sharp knock on my door jolted me awake. I stumbled out of bed, hair sticking up in every direction, and opened the door to find a professional courier in a crisp uniform holding a large manila envelope. Xavier Carter, he asked. That's me. Sign here, please. I scribbled my signature, took the envelope and closed the door. My name was written in elegant script across the front. With trembling fingers, I tore it open and pulled out the contents. Executive Personal Assistant position, Westford Enterprises, salary $95,000 annually, plus benefit. My knees went weak. I read the letter 3 times, then 4, then lost count. This had to be a mistake. I hadn't applied anywhere, least of all to one of the city's most prestigious companies, but there it was, in black and white, an official offer letter with George Westford's signature at the bottom. My phone buzzed. An unknown number. This isn't charity. This is an opportunity. If you're interested, come to my office at 10 a.m. I looked at the clock. It was 8:30. My hands wouldn't stop shaking as I stared at the letter. Then the text. Then back at the letter. Yesterday I was nobody. Today I was holding what could be the answer to every prayer I'd whispered into the darkness of my empty apartment. What exactly was happening? I must have read that offer letter 20 times during the subway ride downtown. The numbers didn't change. The salary stayed the same, enough to not just pay rent but actually save money. Maybe even take a vacation someday. The position description was oddly vague. Executive Personal Assistant to CEO. Duties to include schedule management, personal errands and special projects as assigned. Special projects. What did that even mean? The Westford Enterprises building loomed ahead of me as I emerged from the subway station, all glass and steel, reaching toward the clouds like it was trying to touch something divine. The lobby was all marble floors and modern art that I didn't understand. A massive chandelier hung overhead, catching the light and throwing rainbow prisms across the white walls. I approached the reception desk where a woman with perfect makeup and a name tag that read Miranda looked up at me with practiced professionalism. Hi, I'm here to see Mr. Westford. I received an offer letter and there was a message. I fumbled with my phone trying to pull up the text. Mr. Carter? Her eyebrows rose slightly, and I couldn't tell if that was surprise or judgment. Maybe both. Yes, you're expected. Take the executive elevator to the 42nd floor. Someone will meet you there. Thank you. I tried to sound confident, like I belonged here, but my voice came out smaller than intended. The elevator ride felt eternal. Smooth jazz played through hidden speakers and I watched the floor numbers climb higher and higher. My reflection in the polished steel doors showed a guy who looked way more nervous than I wanted to admit. I straightened my collar, ran my fingers through my hair, and took a deep breath. Whatever happened in the next few minutes would change everything. The doors opened to reveal a reception area that made the lobby look modest. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and I could see for miles in every direction. A woman in a sleek black dress stood near a massive desk, and she smiled warmly when she saw me. "Mr. Carter, please follow me. Mr. Westford is ready to see you." We walked down a hallway lined with abstract paintings and closed office doors. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I worried she could hear it. Finally, we stopped at a set of double doors. She knocked twice, then opened them without waiting for a response. The office was exactly what you'd expect from a CEO: massive desk, expensive furniture, that same incredible view, but what struck me was the man standing by the window. George had his back to me, hands in his pockets, shoulders tense beneath his white dress shirt. His suit jacket hung on a nearby chair, and his sleeves were rolled up to his elbows, revealing surprisingly strong forearms. "Mr. Westford, Mr. Carter is here," the assistant announced before slipping out and closing the doors behind her. George turned slowly, and those dark eyes found mine immediately. Today he looked more rested than yesterday, but there was still something heavy in his expression, like he carried weights I couldn't see. "Javier," he said my name like he was testing how it felt in his mouth. "You can't." The offer was hard to ignore. I admitted, staying near the door because crossing that threshold felt significant somehow. "Though I'm still trying to understand why you sent it." "Sit, please." He gestured to the chairs arranged in front of his desk, but instead of going behind the desk, he leaned against its edge, choosing to stay close. Too close. I could smell his cologne from here, something expensive and woodsy that made my head feel slightly fuzzy. I sat because my legs were shaking, and I needed the support. He studied me for a long moment, his gaze moving across my face like he was memorizing every detail. "My son talked about you all evening yesterday," George finally said, his voice quieter than I expected. "He told me how you made him feel safe, how you bought him ice cream with money you probably couldn't spare. Don't look surprised. I can see the worn edges on your shoes, the way your shirt doesn't quite fit right anymore because you've lost weight. I recognize financial struggle when I see it." Heat crept up my neck. Being seen so thoroughly was uncomfortable, invasive even. But I couldn't look away from him. "Elijah said you have kind eyes, that you listen to him talk about his toys and his school without checking your phone or looking bored. Do you understand how rare that is? Most people treat children like inconveniences, but you—" He paused, searching for words. "You treated him like he mattered." "He does matter. He's a kid who was scared and alone." "Exactly." George pushed off from the desk and moved closer, standing just a few feet from where I sat. "I need someone in my life who understands that principle, that people matter. My previous assistant was competent with spreadsheets and schedules, but they couldn't handle the personal aspects of my life. I'm a single father. Javier, Elijah's mother, left when he was 2. It's been just us for 4 years, and it's the hardest thing I've ever done." The vulnerability in his admission caught me off guard. This powerful CEO, this man who commanded boardrooms and made million-dollar decisions, was confessing something deeply personal to a stranger. "I don't have any formal experience as an assistant," I felt compelled to say. "I worked in retail management before my company downsized. I'm not qualified for this. Qualifications can be taught, character can't." He crouched down so we were at eye level, his hands resting on his knees. "I watched you yesterday, the way you spoke to Elijah, the patience you showed, the genuine care in your actions. That's not something you can put on a resume, but it's exactly what I need. What we need." "We." He said we, including himself and his son in the same breath, making this about more than just a job. "I can train you on the technical aspects. You'll learn my schedule, my preferences, how I operate, but what I can't teach is empathy, and you have that in abundance. I'm offering you this position not despite your lack of experience, but because you have something far more valuable. You have heart." My throat felt tight. No one had ever said anything like that to me before. I'd spent months feeling worthless, like I had nothing to offer, and here was this man telling me I possessed something valuable. What would my responsibilities actually include? I needed to understand the practical side before I let emotion cloud my judgment. George stood and I had to tilt my head back to maintain eye contact. Managing my calendar, coordinating meetings, handling correspondence, but also picking up Elijah from school when I'm caught in meetings. Making sure I actually eat lunch instead of working through it. Reminding me that life exists outside these walls. I need someone who sees me as human, not just a title. That's a lot of trust to place in someone you met yesterday. I'm a good judge of character. It's how I've built this company. He extended his hand toward me and I stared at it for a moment before reaching up to take it. He pulled me to my feet and suddenly we were standing close enough that I could see flecks of gold in his brown eyes. So Javier Carter, do you accept? Every logical part of my brain screamed that this was too fast, too unusual, too good to be true. But another part, the part that had been suffocating under the weight of failure and fear, desperately wanted to say yes. Wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, helping a lost child in the park had been the universe throwing me a lifeline. I accept, I heard myself say, my voice steady despite the chaos in my chest. George's hand was still holding mine and his thumb brushed across my knuckles once before he released me. The touch sent electricity up my arm, and I quickly shoved my hand in my pocket to hide how it trembled. Welcome to Westford Enterprises, Javier. Let me show you around. He grabbed his suit jacket and shrugged it on, transforming back into the polished CEO. But I'd seen beneath that armor now. I'd seen the father, the vulnerable man who needed help just like everyone else. As he led me out of his office to tour the building, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd just agreed to something far more complicated than a simple job. The way he'd looked at me, the intensity in his eyes, the careful way he'd spoken, it all felt heavy with meaning I couldn't quite decipher. But I'd worry about that later. For now, I had a job. I had a chance. And maybe, just maybe, I'd found something I didn't even know I was looking for. The first week passed in a blur of information overload. George's world moved at a pace I'd never experienced, back-to-back conference calls with investors, meetings that ran past midnight, contracts that needed reviewing by dawn. I shadowed him constantly, taking notes on everything from how he liked his coffee black, no sugar, extra hot, to the subtle tells that meant he was about to lose his patience with someone. What surprised me most was how patient he was with me. When I accidentally double-booked his calendar on day 3, he simply rearranged his afternoon without a word of complaint. When I brought him lunch from the wrong restaurant because I'd mixed up his order with someone else's, he ate it anyway and told me the mistake had introduced him to a great new sandwich. You're going to make mistakes, Javier. He'd said that afternoon, leaning back in his chair while I stood there mortified. I'm not expecting perfection. I'm expecting effort and honesty. You're giving me both. But it wasn't just the office work that filled my days. True to what he'd mentioned in our first conversation, Elijah became part of my responsibilities too. That Friday George had a meeting run late, so I drove to Elijah's private school in the company car. Experience that terrified me since I was more used to subway trains than luxury vehicles. Elijah's face lit up when he saw me at pickup. Javier, did you come to get me? He launched himself into my arms with the kind of unself-conscious affection that children do so easily. Your dad's stuck in a meeting, so you're stuck with me for a bit. That okay? I buckled him into his car seat, making sure everything was secure. More than okay. Can we get ice cream again? I checked my phone. George's meeting wasn't scheduled to end for another hour. How about we grab some ice cream and then head to the park until your dad finishes up? The joy on his face was worth any potential rule I might be breaking. Watching Elijah on the playground, his laughter carrying across the space as he climbed the jungle gym, something warm settled in my chest. I'd always liked kids but never thought much about having any of my own. Yet here I was feeling protective and oddly content while this 7-year-old showed me his skills on the monkey bars. Uncle Javier, watch this. He hung upside down, his face turning red as blood rushed to his head. Very impressive, but maybe don't stay like that too long, buddy. I positioned myself underneath him, just in case, and he giggled before flipping himself back upright with surprising agility. My phone buzzed with a text from George. Meeting ended early. Where are you? I sent him our location and 15 minutes later I spotted him walking across the park toward us. He'd loosened his tie and unbuttoned the top button of his shirt. looking more relaxed than I'd seen him all week. When Elijah noticed his father, he jumped off the swing mid-arc, giving me a minor heart attack, and ran to him. George caught him easily, swinging him up and around in a circle before setting him down. Having fun? Xavier took me for ice cream and brought me here. He's the best. Elijah grabbed both our hands, standing between us, and started swinging back and forth. I caught George's eye over Elijah's head, then something passed between us. A shared moment of understanding, of connection. His expression softened in a way I'd never seen in the office, and I realized this was who he truly was when the armor came off. Just a dad who loved his kid and was grateful someone else cared too. "Thank you," he mouthed silently. I nodded, unable to trust my voice because my chest felt suddenly too full. The following week brought a new rhythm. I started arriving at the office earlier to prepare George's schedule before he got in. I learned the names of his key clients, memorized his preferences, anticipated his needs before he voiced them, but it was the small, unplanned moments that threw me off balance. Like Tuesday afternoon, when I was reorganizing files in his office while he worked at his desk. The late afternoon sunlight streamed through the windows, turning everything golden, and I glanced up to find him watching me. Not in a creepy way, but with a sort of curious intensity that made my hands fumble with the papers. "Something wrong?" I asked, trying to sound casual. "No, just thinking about how much calmer this space feels with you in it." He turned his attention back to his laptop, but I saw the slight smile tugging at his lips. For Wednesday morning, when I brought him his coffee and found him standing at the window, stress evident in every line of his body. Without thinking, I walked over and stood next to him, following his gaze out at the city spread below us. "Rough start?" I ventured. "Board meeting in an hour. They're going to push back on my development proposal for the waterfront project. Politics and egos." He sighed, running a hand through his hair and messing up the careful styling. "Sometimes I forget why I do this. 'Cause you're good at it. 'Cause you build things that last. Because your son watches everything you do and learns what it means to work hard and care about quality." The words came out before I could stop them, too personal, too familiar. But George turned to look at me, really look at me, and the intensity in his gaze made my breath catch. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say exactly what I need to hear." His voice dropped lower, and he took a half step closer. We were near enough now that I could feel the heat radiating from his body. "You've been here less than 2 weeks, but you already understand me better than people I've known for years." I should have stepped back, should have made some joke to lighten the moment. But I couldn't move, couldn't think beyond the fact that we were alone in his office with the door closed and something electric was building in the space between us. "Maybe you're just easier to understand than you think," I managed to say. "Or maybe you're better at seeing people than you realize." His hand lifted, and for one heart-stopping second, I thought he was going to touch my face. But instead he glanced at his watch and stepped back, the moment shattering like glass. "I should review those documents before the meeting." "Right. Yes. I gestured vaguely toward the door and escaped, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. That evening, after everyone else had left and the office was quiet except for the hum of computers, I went to check on George one last time before heading home. He was still at his desk, looking exhausted, his tie discarded and his hair disheveled from running his hands through it repeatedly. I started to leave, but something made me pause. I grabbed a notepad and wrote quickly, "Go home, Mr. Westford. Elijah is waiting, and whatever you're working on will still be here tomorrow." I placed it on his desk where he'd see it and turned to leave. "Javier?" His voice stopped me at the door. I turned back to find him standing now, the note in his hand, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "You should know something." He moved around the desk, and I forced myself to stay put, even though every instinct told me to run from whatever he was about to say. "You're not just my assistant. You've become important. To me. To Elijah. To our lives." The confession hung in the air between us, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to examine. My mouth went dry, and I couldn't find words to respond. "I don't want you to feel uncomfortable," he continued, his voice rough. "But I also can't pretend that having you around is simply professional. You've brought something into our world that was missing, and He stopped, seemed to struggle with what to say next. "I just wanted you to know that." Everything in me wanted to close the distance between us. to respond to the vulnerability in his eyes. But this was my boss. This was a man with power and influence. While I was still struggling to pay off my credit card debt, the dynamics were all wrong. Even if my heart was screaming that something felt impossibly right. I should go, I whispered, because if I stayed one more second I'd do something stupid. He nodded slowly, understanding flickering across his face. See you tomorrow, Javier. I left his office and didn't breathe properly until I was outside the building, the cool night air hitting my flushed face. I walked to the subway in a daze, my mind replaying every word, every look, every moment of the past 2 weeks. Something was happening between George and me, something neither of us had planned but couldn't seem to stop, and I had absolutely no idea what to do about it. The tension from our almost confession hung in the air for days. George became more attentive, his gaze lingering on me during meetings in ways that made my pulse quicken. I caught myself watching him too, the way he rubbed his temples when stressed, how his laugh sounded different around Elijah, the protective way he touched the small of my back when guiding me through crowded hallways. Thursday afternoon brought an unexpected complication. I was picking up Elijah from school as usual, and he climbed into the car with his backpack dragging behind him, unusually quiet. Rough day, buddy. I adjusted the rearview mirror to see him better. He was silent for a moment, then blurted out, "Uncle Javier, why don't you tell Dad you like him?" I nearly swerved into the next lane. My face burned hot as I gripped the steering wheel tighter. "Elijah, that's not really something we should talk about. But he likes you too." His voice carried that innocent certainty children have before the world teaches them to doubt. "He smiles more now. Before you came, he was always tired and sad. Now he laughs at dinner and asks about my day without looking at his phone." My heart clenched. I pulled into a parking spot near the park, our usual stop before heading back to the office. Sometimes grown-up relationships are complicated. Your dad is my boss, and there are rules about. Rules are dumb if they make people unhappy. Elijah unbuckled himself and climbed into the front seat, settling beside me with alarming wisdom in his young eyes. "I heard Dad tell Uncle Marcus that you make everything better. He said you're the best thing that happened to us." The words hit me like a physical blow. George had said that about me. "When did you hear this?" My voice came out rough. "Last week. They were in Dad's office and I was supposed to be doing homework. But I came to ask about dinner." Elijah played with the zipper on his jacket. "Uncle Marcus said something mean about you being too young and inexperienced. But Dad got really mad. He said you were worth 10 of any assistant he'd ever had, and that Marcus needed to back off." Pride and fear warred in my chest. George had defended me, but what did that mean for both of us? The next morning, George called me into a private conference room after the usual Friday executive meeting. My stomach churned with anxiety as I followed him, watching other employees file out with curious glances. He closed the door and leaned against it, looking more uncertain than I'd ever seen him. His tie was slightly crooked and there were shadows under his eyes like he hadn't slept. "I need to be transparent with you about something." He crossed his arms then uncrossed them, clearly struggling with whatever he wanted to say. "Your position here is completely secure. Nothing I'm about say changes that. If you want to transfer to a different department or even a different company with my recommendation, I'll support that decision fully." My mouth went dry. "What are you talking about?" "I'm trying to give you an out." His voice dropped lower, more vulnerable. "Because what I'm feeling, what's been building between us, it puts you in an impossible situation. You work for me. I control your income, your career trajectory here. That power imbalance isn't fair to you." I stared at him, my brain struggling to process what he was saying. He was trying to protect me from himself. "Do you see me as your employee when you look at me?" The question escaped before I could stop it. "No." The answer was immediate and fierce. "I see someone who makes me want to be better. Someone who reminds me that life exists outside profit margins and quarterly reports. Someone who treats my son like he matters more than any business deal." He pushed off from the door, taking a step closer. "I see you, Javier. Not a position or a role. You." Something inside me cracked open, then stopped trying to push me away for my own good. "I'm an adult. Let me make my own choices." "And what would you choose?" The question hung between us, heavy with possibility. Before I could answer, the door opened without warning. Marcus stood there, his expression hardening as he took in our proximity, the intimate way we were standing, the emotion clearly written across both our faces. The investors are waiting in the main conference room. His tone was ice. They've been waiting for 15 minutes, George. George's jaw tightened, frustration radiating off him. Tell them I'll be there in 5 minutes. They specifically requested you both. Marcus's gaze shifted to me, something calculating in his eyes. Apparently they want to meet the assistant everyone's been talking about. My stomach dropped. That didn't sound good. George must have sensed my panic because his hand briefly touched my elbow, steadying. We'll finish this conversation. I promise. I nodded, not trusting my voice, and followed them both to the conference room where 3 stern-faced investors waited. The meeting was brutal. They grilled me about my qualifications, my background, making thinly veiled comments about nepotism and favoritism. George defended me professionally, but I could see the anger building in the set of his shoulders, the clipped precision of his words. When we finally escaped 2 hours later, I went straight to the bathroom and splashed cold water on my face. My hands were shaking. Marcus's words from the hallway echoed in my head. You're out of your depth. People like you don't belong in this world. Maybe he was right. Maybe I was fooling myself thinking I could navigate this complicated situation. George was powerful, established, respected. I was a guy who'd been unemployed 3 months ago, now playing house with dreams I had no right to dream. That evening, I was filing documents in George's office when he returned from yet another meeting. He looked exhausted, defeated in a way I'd never seen. They got to you, didn't they? He didn't phrase it as a question. Marcus and his concerns about propriety and company image. They weren't wrong. I kept my eyes on the files, unable to look at him. I'm not qualified for this position. Everyone knows it. I'm here because you felt grateful I helped Elijah, not because I earned it. Stop. The single word was commanding enough that I looked up. George stood there, his hands clenched into fists at his sides, emotion raw on his face. Don't let them put that poison in your head. You want to know why you're really here? Why I offered you this job? I waited, barely breathing, because for the first time in 4 years, my son ran to the door excited when I came home, because my inbox isn't full of complaints about my assistant being rude or incompetent, because I actually eat lunch now instead of working through it, because you physically put food in front of me and don't leave until I take a bite. His voice grew rougher, because when I'm drowning in stress and deadlines, you somehow know exactly what to say to pull me back. That's not luck or charity. That's you being exceptional at what you do. Tears pricked at my eyes. I blinked them back furiously. Marcus cornered me today, didn't he? George's expression darkened. What did he say? I hesitated, then decided he deserved the truth. That this is inappropriate. That I'm a distraction you can't afford. That people in my position don't last long because eventually the fantasy crashes against reality. He's wrong. George moved around the desk, eliminating the distance between us. His hand reached out, fingers gently tilting my chin up so I had to meet his eyes. This isn't fantasy. My feelings for you aren't some temporary fascination that'll fade. I've spent weeks trying to talk myself out of this, trying to convince myself I'm just grateful or projecting or anything else that would make sense. But it's none of those things. Then what is it? My voice came out as a whisper. It's realizing I haven't felt this alive in years. It's wanting to hear about your day more than I want to check my stock portfolio. It's Elijah asking when you're coming over like you're already family. His thumb brushed across my cheekbone, and I leaned into the touch involuntarily. It's being terrified I'm going to scare you away, but more terrified of letting you walk out that door thinking you don't matter. My resolve crumbled completely. I'm scared too. Scared this ends badly. Scared I'm reading everything wrong. Scared that one day you'll realize I'm just mine. The word came out possessive, final. If you'll let me, not my employee, mine. Time seemed to suspend. Every rational thought screamed at me to step back, to maintain professional boundaries, to protect myself from inevitable heartbreak. But my heart had already made its choice weeks ago. Probably that first day in the park when I'd seen him transform from powerful CEO to desperate father. I don't know how this works. My admission was shaky but honest. I don't know how to navigate us. Neither do I. A small smile tugged at his lips. but I'm willing to figure it out if you are. Before I could overthink it, I closed the remaining distance between us and kissed him. The kiss changed everything and nothing simultaneously. George's hand slid into my hair, holding me close as his lips moved against mine with a hunger that matched my own. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, reality crashed back in. We can't do this here. His forehead rested against mine, voice rough. Anyone could walk in. Your office has locks, I pointed out, surprising myself with the boldness. He laughed, the sound low and intimate. Tempting, but no. I want to do this right. No hiding. No secrets that make you feel cheap or temporary. His hand cupped my face. Come to dinner tomorrow. At my house, you, me, and Elijah. Let's see what this could look like outside these walls. I agreed, my heart hammering with anticipation and terror. That night I barely slept, playing out 1,000 scenarios of how dinner could go wrong. Saturday evening arrived too quickly. I stood outside George's brownstone in a neighborhood I couldn't afford to even window shop in, clutching a bottle of wine and second-guessing everything. Before I could spiral completely, the door flew open and Elijah launched himself at me. You came. Dad said you might be too busy, but I knew you'd come. His enthusiasm was infectious, easing some of my anxiety. George appeared behind him, casual in jeans and a sweater that made him look younger, more approachable. Come in before you freeze. The house was beautiful. Hardwood floors, artwork that was probably worth more than my car, but also lived in. Elijah's drawings covered the refrigerator, toys scattered near the couch, photos of him at various ages lining the hallway. This was a home, not a showplace. Dinner was surprisingly easy. Elijah dominated the conversation with stories about school, showing me his latest Lego creation, begging George to let him stay up past bedtime. Watching them together, the easy affection and inside jokes, I felt something settle in my chest. This was real. This wasn't some fantasy I'd constructed. After Elijah finally went to bed following 3 stories and 4 glasses of water, George led me to the rooftop terrace. The city spread out before us, lights twinkling like stars, and the cool night air helped clear my head. He adores you. George handed me a beer, our fingers brushing. I've never seen him attached to someone so quickly. The feeling's mutual. He's an incredible kid. I took a sip, gathering courage. You've done an amazing job with him. It's been hard. The admission came quietly. His mother left a note and disappeared when he was 2. No explanation, no contact since. For years I blamed myself, wondering what I did wrong, if I was too focused on work, if I failed somehow. He stared out at the skyline. Building the company became easier than dealing with the pain. I threw myself into acquisitions and expansions while nannies raised my son. My chest ached for him. But you changed that. I had to. Last year Elijah got sick, just a flu, but he was crying for his mom and all I could offer was my assistant's phone number to reach me in Tokyo. Shame colored his voice. I looked at my son, feverish and miserable, and realized I was becoming the kind of father I swore I'd never be. Absent. Replaceable. You're neither of those things. I set my beer down and moved closer. Elijah lights up when you walk in a room. He saves his best stories for you. That's not an absent parent. George turned to face me fully, vulnerability written across his features in the dim light. You make me want to be better, both as a father and a man. These past weeks with you have reminded me what actually matters. Don't put me on a pedestal. The words came out firmer than intended. I'm not some saint who swooped in to save you. I'm just a guy who was in the right place at the right time. You're selling yourself short again. His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. Why do you do that? Diminish your own worth? The question hit deeper than he probably intended. I looked away, fighting the vulnerability threatening to spill out. Because it's safer. If I don't expect much, I can't be disappointed when I inevitably fall short. Who made you feel like that? Anger edged his tone, but not directed at me. Who convinced you that you weren't enough? I shrugged, old wounds throbbing. Growing up poor does that. Watching my mom work 3 jobs and still struggle to keep the lights on. Being the scholarship kid at school where everyone else had trust funds. My ex who left because I couldn't give him the lifestyle he wanted. The admission burn. You learn pretty quick that what you offer isn't valuable enough. Your ex was an idiot. George pulled me against him, wrapping his arms around me from behind so we both faced the city. What you offer is everything. Kindness, patience, genuine care for people beyond what they can do for you. That's rare. Javier, that's precious. I leaned back into his warmth, letting myself believe him for just this moment. This is moving fast. We barely know each other. I know you take your coffee with too much sugar. I know you call your mom every Sunday evening. I know you scrunch your nose when you're concentrating on something difficult. His lips brushed my temple. I know you make my son feel safe and my house feel like a home instead of just a building. What else do I need to know? That I'm terrified. The confession slipped out. That this feels too good to be real. That people in my position don't usually get happy endings. Then we'll write a different story. He turned me in his arms, his expression fierce. One where we both get what we deserve. Where we choose each other every single day, even when it's complicated or messy. Can you trust me enough to try? Looking into his eyes, seeing the hope and determination there, I realized I'd already made my choice. Maybe weeks ago in his office. Or maybe that first day in the park. Timing didn't matter anymore. Yes, the word was simple but held everything. I trust you. He kissed me then, slow and deep and full of promise. When we broke apart, he rested his forehead against mine. Fair warning. Marcus isn't going to make this easy. He's already been making noise about conflicts of interest and unprofessional behavior. Let him. I surprised myself with the defiance in my voice. I'm not going anywhere. Good. His smile was predatory. Because I plan on keeping you for a very long time. We stayed on the terrace until the cold drove us inside, talking about everything and nothing. His college years, my failed attempts at cooking, Elijah's upcoming school play, dreams we'd set aside and ones we still chased. By the time I left, the sun was threatening the horizon and I felt more hopeful than I had in years. Monday morning brought the inevitable fallout. Marcus requested a meeting with George that turned into a shouting match loud enough that I could hear it through the closed door. When George emerged an hour later, his expression was thunderous but resolved. Pack your things. You're moving to the executive floor. He walked past my desk without breaking stride. As of today, you report directly to me with no intermediaries. Marcus can handle his hurt feelings on his own time. Several employees stared as I gathered my belongings, whispers following me to the elevator. George was waiting when I arrived, directing movers on where to place my new desk, right outside his office door, impossible to miss. This is a statement. I watched him position my chair exactly how I liked it. Everyone's going to know. Good. He met my eyes. No hesitation. Let them know you're important to me. Let them know I don't care about their judgments. You're here because you belong here, and anyone who has a problem with that can discuss it with me directly. Heat flooded my chest, part embarrassment, part fierce pride. He was choosing me publicly. Consequences be damned. That evening, as we reviewed schedules in his office, he caught my hand across the desk. I meant what I said on the terrace. Every word. This isn't some phase or midlife crisis. You're it for me. Even though it's only been a month? My voice wavered. Even though this is crazy and fast and probably a dozen kinds of inappropriate, especially because of all that. He smiled. That rare, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. I spent years doing everything right, marrying the appropriate person, building the perfect company, following every rule. And I ended up alone and miserable. Maybe it's time to do something that feels right instead. I squeezed his hand, unable to articulate the emotions overwhelming me. So I settled for the simple truth. This feels right to me too. Then that's all that matters. He raised my hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to my knuckles. We'll figure out the rest as we go. And in that moment, surrounded by the trappings of corporate success but holding on to something infinitely more valuable, I believed him. We would figure it out. Together. 2 months transformed my entire world. George and I fell into a rhythm that felt natural despite its unconventional start. Mornings began at his place, where I'd help Elijah get ready for school while George handled early conference calls. Evenings ended there too. The three of us cooking dinner together, or more accurately, George and I cooking while Elijah provided enthusiastic but chaotic assistance. The office whispers never fully stopped. But they mattered less when George would catch my eye across a conference table and smile like we shared a secret. When his hand would find mine under his desk during late nights finishing projects. When he'd pull me into his private bathroom just to steal a kiss between meetings. Marcus eventually transferred to the West Coast branch, his departure coinciding with several board members quietly expressing their support for George's choices. Turned out most people cared more about results than gossip, and the company's profits had never been stronger. Sunday morning found us at the breakfast table, a scene that had become wonderfully routine. Elijah was building a tower out of his pancakes, while George read the financial section, occasionally reaching over to steal berries from my plate. "Dad, can Uncle Javier move in with us?" Elijah asked suddenly, his voice carrying that matter-of-fact tone children use when asking for something they've already decided should happen. "Like actually live here? With his stuff in your room and everything?" I choked on my orange juice. George set down his newspaper, his expression caught between amusement and something deeper. "That's a pretty big question, buddy." "Why do you ask?" "Because he's here every day anyway." Elijah's logic was irrefutable in his 7-year-old mind. "And I heard you tell Grandma on the phone that Javier is your partner now. Partners live together, right? Like Tommy's dads at school." George's eyes met mine across the table, a silent question in their depths. We'd been dancing around this topic for weeks. I still kept my apartment despite rarely sleeping there, maintaining the fiction of separate lives even though we'd long since merged them. "What do you think, Javier?" George's voice was careful, giving me space to decline if I wanted. "Is that something you'd want?" My heart hammered against my ribs. This was huge, not just moving in together but being openly claimed as part of their family unit. No more pretense, no more hedging, full commitment. "I think," I started slowly, watching Elijah's hopeful face, "that I'd like that very much. If you're both sure." Elijah whooped and launched himself at me, nearly knocking over his pancake tower in his enthusiasm. George came around the table, pulling us both into his arms. And for a moment we just stayed there, this makeshift family that somehow worked despite its unusual origins. Later, after Elijah went to play in his room, George led me to the terrace. The late morning sun warmed the space, city sounds muted by distance and heights. "You're certain about this?" He turned me to face him, hands gentle on my shoulders. "Once you move in, once we're fully committed like this, there's no taking it back without consequences. Elijah will be devastated if things don't work out." "Do you think things won't work out?" I challenged, searching his face. "No." The answer was immediate and firm. "I think I'm going to spend the rest of my life with you. But I need you to believe that too, not just hope for it." Something shifted in my chest, that last piece of armor I'd been holding onto finally cracking open. I was so lost when we met. Broke, unemployed, convinced I'd never amount to anything. You saw something in me I couldn't see in myself. "I saw who you actually are." His thumb brushed my cheekbone. "Not who you'd been told you should be. You and Elijah saved me in that park just as much as I helped him." The admission came rough, emotion thick in my throat. "You gave me purpose and family and a reason to believe I deserved good things. So yes, I'm certain. More certain about this than anything in my life." George kissed me then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When we pulled apart, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "I need to tell you something." His voice dropped to that vulnerable register I'd learned meant he was about to reveal something important. When Elijah's mother left, she told me I was incapable of truly connecting with anyone, that I was married to my work and always would be. For years I believed her. Pain flashed across his features, old wounds reopening. I convinced myself I didn't need partnership or love beyond what I could provide. Elijah. That I was better off alone, more efficient, less vulnerable. And then you showed up with your stupid kind eyes and genuine care, and demolished every wall I'd built. "George," I started, but he shook his head. "Let me finish. You make me want things I'd given up on. Weekend trips just because. Lazy mornings in bed. Growing old with someone who actually knows me, not just the CEO mask I wear." His hands framed my face. "I'm deeply, irrevocably in love with you, Javier. Not infatuated, not grateful, in love. The kind that doesn't fade or falter." Tears spilled down my cheeks before I could stop them. "I love you too," So much it terrifies me sometimes. Good scared or bad scared. His thumbs wiped away my tears. Good scared. The kind that means this matters. That you matter. I pulled him closer, needing to feel the solid reality of him. I never thought I'd have this someone who sees all of me and chooses to stay anyway. Always. The promise was absolute. Through board meetings and tantrums and boring Sundays and everything in between. You're stuck with us now. Best thing that ever happened to me. I kissed him again, pouring every ounce of feeling into it. That day in the park when Elijah asked about his dad, I had no idea my entire life was about to change. Fate works in mysterious ways. George smiled against my lips. Who knew helping a lost child would lead to finding home? Elijah's voice carried from inside. Dad. Javier. Can we get ice cream to celebrate Javier moving in? Please? We laughed, breaking apart but keeping our hands linked. George called back. Only if you promise to clean your room first. Deal. As we headed inside, George's hands secure in mine, I marveled at how far we'd come. From desperate strangers in a park, to this real, messy, beautiful family. The kind I'd stopped believing existed for people like me. That evening, we started moving my belongings from my apartment. It didn't take long, I'd never accumulated much. But each box George carried felt significant. My books on his shelves, my clothes in his closet, my toothbrush next to his in the bathroom. Physical proof that this wasn't temporary or conditional. That I belonged here with them, permanently. Elijah helped enthusiastically, chattering about how we could arrange my stuff, which drawer I should use, whether I wanted the left or right side of the bed. George just smiled and let him direct the operation, occasionally catching my eye with an expression of such contentment it made my chest ache. That night, after Elijah was asleep and the last box unpacked, George pulled me onto the terrace one more time. Thank you, he said quietly, for taking a chance on us, for being brave enough to build something new. Thank you for seeing me. I leaned into his embrace, watching the city lights blur and shimmer. For giving me a reason to be found. We stood there as the night deepened, two people who'd been lost in different ways now firmly anchored to each other. The park where this started was somewhere out there in the dark. Witness to the chance encounter that changed everything. Tomorrow I'd wake up in this house as more than a guest. As George's partner. As part of Elijah's family. As someone who finally, after years of feeling insufficient, knew he was exactly enough. The belonging I'd craved my entire life had arrived in the most unexpected way. Through helping a scared child and accepting an impossible job offer from his desperate father. And now here I was. Home in every sense that mattered. George pressed a kiss to my temple. Ready to start forever? I turned in his arms, meeting his eyes with absolute certainty. With you and Elijah? I've been ready since the day we met. And as he kissed me under the stars, our future stretching bright and unknown before us, I knew that every struggle, every moment of doubt, every fear had led me exactly here. To this man, this child, this life, to home.